Story is Wanda's Roses by Pat Brisson. One morning in May, on the way to school, Wanda noticed a bush growing in the empty corner at the corner of Fillmore and Hudson Streets. It must have been growing for a while because it was about 2 feet tall, and Wanda was surprised that she hadn't noticed it before. But there it was, bare and thorny, and Wanda, who loved beautiful things, felt her heart to beat faster. "A rose bush," she said. "My very own rose bush." Now, the rose bush didn't really belong to Wanda, but since nobody seemed to own the lot and the heaps of junk that were piled there, she decided that she would care for this bush and make it her own. During school, she thought all about her rose bush. During art, she drew pictures of what it would look like in bloom. During library, she borrowed books on arranging flowers. And during science, she asked so many questions about how to take care of it that finally the teacher said she really must stop asking questions about roses and start thinking about electricity, which was what the lesson was about. After school, she rushed to the rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needs some more sun, she thought. So Wanda put down her school bag and began dragging some of the nearby trash out to the curb. Miss Turner, who was on her way to the store, stopped to help her with a broken chair. "Cleaning up that neighborhood, Wanda?" Miss Turner asked. "That's a nice project for you." "Oh, it's not just cleaning," Wanda told her. "I'm helping my rose bush get more sun so it will bloom." "Your rose bush?" Miss Turner asked. "Where is your rose bush?" "Over there," Wanda said, pointing proudly to the bare, thorny bush. "Oh, Wanda, I'm not so sure that's a rose bush," said Miss Turner gently. "Oh, I'm sure it is," said Wanda. "I've seen rose bushes in books before, and that is what they look like before they bloom. You just wait. In a few weeks, this lot will be full of roses." "Well," said Miss Turner, shaking her head, "good luck with it, Wanda." And she started to walk away. Miss Turner thought to herself, "If that's a rose bush, then I'm the Queen of England." I don't think she thinks it's a rose bush. The next day after school, Wanda hurried to her rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needs more air, thought Wanda. So she put down her school bag and began taking more of the trash to the curb. "Once I get this trash all out of here, nothing will block the air from getting to my rose bush," Wanda thought. Mr. Claudel, who was on his way home from work, saw Wanda trying to drag an old door and stopped to help her. "Cleaning up the neighborhood, are you, Wanda?" he asked. "Not just cleaning, Mr. Claudel," Wanda told him. "I'm getting rid of this trash so my rose bush will get more air." "A rose bush here?" he said. And Wanda showed him the rose bush. "I don't know about gardening, Wanda," Mr. Claudel frowned, "but I don't think that's a rose bush." "Sure it is," said Wanda, "and in a few weeks this lot will be filled with the sweetest smelling roses you ever saw." She thanked Mr. Claudel for his help and went off to drag away some more trash. Mr. Claudel shook his head. "That's a rose bush," he said to himself. "Then I'm the King of France." I don't think he's the King of France. Every day after school that week, the rest of the week, Wanda worked in the empty lot. Miss Giamoni, who lived in the apartment next door, gave Wanda trash bags for the old shoes, beer bottles, broken toys, and bits of glass that she was picking up. "You've done a great job cleaning up this lot, Wanda," Miss Giamoni said. "Oh, I'm not just cleaning," Wanda said. "I have to get rid of all this trash so my rose bush will get enough sun and fresh air to bloom." "But where is your rose bush?" Miss Giamoni asked. So Wanda showed her. Miss Giamoni put her hand on Wanda's shoulder and spoke softly to her. "Wanda," she said, "this is not a rose bush." "Oh, it is," said Wanda. And in a few weeks, this lot will be filled with the most beautiful roses you have ever seen. That would be nice, Miss Giamoni said, but I don't want you to be disappointed if this bush doesn't bloom. Don't worry, Miss Giamoni, Wanda answered. I won't be disappointed. Miss Giamoni sighed. That is not a rose bush, and it never will be one, she thought to herself. The next week, when the rosebush still hadn't blossomed, Wanda talked to her school librarian. I need books about getting roses to bloom, she told Mrs. Jones. Oh, do you have a rose bush, Wanda? Miss Jones asked. Yes, but it doesn't have flowers yet, and I know that it has been getting enough sun and fresh air. Does it have enough water? Miss Jones asked. Water, Wanda said. Of course. That will make it bloom. That afternoon, she hurried to the rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. She looked at the dry ground, and she smiled. Don't worry, little bush, she said out loud. I'll get you some water, and then you'll be able to grow flowers. So Wanda went to the butcher's shop across the street. Mr. Sanchez, would you please give me some water for my rose bush? Rose bush? Is that what I see you taking care of and talking to every single day over there? Are you sure that's a rose bush, Wanda? Mr. Sanchez asked. Oh, yes, I'm sure, Wanda said. But it can't bloom because it needs water. Mr. Sanchez gave her water in a plastic bucket. I hope that really is a rosebush, Wanda, he said, looking at her doubtfully. You'll see, Wanda told him. In a few weeks, that whole lot will be full of roses. And as Wanda carried the water to her rosebush, Mr. Sanchez muttered, In a few weeks, that thorn bush will still be a thorn bush. Every day, Wanda ran to her rosebush after school. But every day it was still bare and still thorny. She watered it and sang to it and checked its bare branches for roses. Mr. Claudel on his way home from work stopped to see if there was any roses yet. Mrs. Turner on her way to the butcher shop stopped to see if there was any roses yet. Mrs. Giamoni, seeing Wanda in the lot, called down to her apartment to ask if there were any roses yet. And when Wanda went to the library at school, Mrs. Jones asked, Were there any roses yet? And every day when Wanda went to the butcher's shop for water, Mr. Sanchez asked, Are there any roses yet? And to each person, Wanda would answer the same thing. Just you wait. Pretty soon this whole lot will be filled with roses. And then one day in June, Wanda had an idea. Looking at the bare thorny bush, she said, If my rose bush won't give me roses, then I will just have to give roses to my rose bush. And when she saw Mrs. Turner, Mr. Claudel, Mrs. Giamoni, Mrs. Jones, and Mr. Sanchez, she gave each of them an invitation that said, Please come for tea and muffins in Wanda's rose garden, Saturday morning at 9. Oh dear, said Mrs. Turner. Is she still expecting roses from that bush? Oh no, said Mr. Claudel, and she's working so hard too. Oh my, said Mrs. Giamoni, she'll be so disappointed. Oh darn, said Mr. Sanchez, there must be something that I can do. Oh good, said Mrs. Jones, who had only heard about the bush from Wanda and hadn't seen it for herself. I will bring the muffins, she said, not knowing anything about the lot. The night before the tea party, everyone was very busy. The next morning at 9, everyone was surprised to see that Wanda's rosebush was covered in roses. Paper roses, but still roses that Wanda had made herself and carefully tied to each bare, thorny branch. But there was more surprises yet to come. Everyone who came to the party brought along a rosebush to plant. Wanda, except for Mrs. Jones, who had brought delicious blueberry muffins. But everyone came with flowers and roses ready to plant in Wanda's lot. After they had eaten their muffins and drank their tea, they got very busy planting rose bushes. Mr. Claudel and Miss Turner dug the holes. Mrs. Yamoni held the bushes in place while Wanda and Mrs. Jones filled in around the roots with soil. And Mr. Sanchez brought water from his shop and watered them all thoroughly. When the work was finished, Mr. Claudel said, "Wanda, this is going to be a rose garden fit for a king." "Or a queen," said Mrs. Turner, and Wanda and the others smiled. And later that summer, the whole lot was filled with the biggest, most beautiful, sweetest smelling flowers and roses anyone had ever seen, just as Wanda had always said they would be. The end.